Also understand how to use the skills to improve your sales process, execution, and optimize your performance. So what do we think? What is sales? When we say sales, what is sales for us? So for us in business, what do we call sales? Use the chat box. What do we call sales? If you're selling a product or if you're selling a service, what would you call sales? What does sales mean for you? Can you share in the chat box, please? And I won't mind if I can get one or two persons to raise up their hands and share what does sales mean for them in their business. Anyone? Providing a solution to a problem, okay. To a need, okay. I want to believe that we are small businesses, and every day we try as much as possible to create value and also deliver the value and capture the value. So what does sales mean for us in business, in our own business? What does sales mean? John says sales meetings, a client for money. Okay, so I'm saying sales, not sales meeting, John. Just sales. The word sales. What does sales mean? But you said sales meeting a client. Okay, meeting a client need on money. Okay, for money. Okay, I understand that now. Tim Lane says customers. Let me read that to me. Sales means understanding what customer need and meeting is. Okay, very good. That's OV. In short, sales is turning interest into action, convincing someone to buy something. Very good, veteran. Okay, any other one? Any other answers? Okay, so let's look at it this way. First of all, for sales to occur, there has to be an exchange. So basically, you could just say sales is when, so someone said, he says last step in marketing, very good. Someone said sales involves a transaction between the business owner and the customer. Very good as well. In marketing, we like to refer to sales as the process where there's an exchange of goods and services or asset for money or other compensation. So what it means is that if there is no exchange, sales has not occurred. Now, marketing is different from selling. Selling is the last step in marketing, or even used to be the last step in marketing, but now there's also the action of after closing the sale, there's a follow-up to it. So it's important that we also understand that from the sales aspect, if there's no exchange, sale has not occurred. That means there's no transaction. So marketing generates the lead in terms of maybe building the products, building the market. But for revenue to be generated in the business, right? Selling must occur. Now, every day we live our life trying to generate revenue in our business, right? And that tells you the importance of selling, because selling becomes the foundation for transaction. And when we say transaction, it doesn't have to mean that it has to be money. Selling could be exchange of value. So value could be that, okay, so if I want to, for example, on this project right now, right? The DigiSkill, there are 5 partners involved, right? And every project, every partner has a work package. Now, everyone is meant to deliver their work package around the products or service. So that would be called selling. So there has to be an exchange of value. If youth power does not see the value that QSR gives, right? They might not continue the relationship. If youth power does not see the value that maybe say, let's say Champion Factory gives, they might not continue the relationship. So also when you're building relationship, right, selling becomes an important instrument for it. Now, how do we connect sales to project management? Remember, project management is the application of specific knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to activities to meet project requirements. So when you even use the word project, that means there's a start and there's an end, right? If you take it to sales as well, right? The sales process, there's a starting point and there's also an ending point. The reason why we call it a cycle is because once you achieve the sale, right, go back into the cycle again and continue the process again. And that's how businesses are able to survive every day, by continuously making sales and to generate revenue in their business. Whether it's for money, whether it's for compensation, whether it's relationship, but there has to be exchange of value in both ways. So one of the things we could also think about sales from the angle of selling is that we used to call selling is like an art. So basically, like you have maybe sales rep in your businesses, and most of these guys, they have the intuition, they also have maybe the skills, maybe good communication skills, you know, to build rapport. But it has, for a long time, selling has been dependent on individuals, right? Which is not a bad thing. But at the same time, what that also does is that it limits the potential of what you as a business can achieve with it. So as deals become more complex, right, the loan wolf sales approach is failing. Do you understand? So now, by applying a structured project management methodology, sales professionals can control what the chaos of modern selling. Because today, if you think about it, selling is not so easy. There's always this phrase that says everyone is selling, but how many people are buying? So every day, look at social media, look at Instagram, look at TikTok, look at Facebook, right? You're constantly being bombarded with products and services, right? And you're meant to make a decision on also on how you purchase or buy these products or service. So what is the key concept for us as a business? We need to treat every deal as a project with a defined start, end, scope, and resources. And that brings us to ask the question, how many of us do have a sales plan in the business? If you're a small business and you have a sales plan, right, kindly indicate in the chat box. If you have a sales plan, so basically it's not, oh, like, so I'm saying not, I come to my business every day, I come to the office or I come to my store, right, and I'm open, okay, I see customers and I just approach, oh, I have this product, I have this service, can you buy, right? Or is there a structure, right? Is there a plan to sell in the business? How many of you have a sales plan? Is there a sales goal? Do you understand the resources that requires in terms of the human resources, in terms of material or machineries? Do you understand the financial resources? Is there a budget to what you're doing? Does anyone right now have a sales plan? Because the sales plan speaks to the way a project is being executed or implemented. And that's why we say the key concepts where sales would be project management would be treat every deal. So I want to close a deal, which is I want to close a deal. That is the project. I want to get a Timmy to come and purchase my product. I want to get OV to render my service. That is a deal. What is the starting point? What is the goal for the business, right? And how would I close that deal? Is there a document? Is there a plan in place that allows me to be able to work with? So as a small business, does anyone right now have a sales plan? So most times you can also have a sales plan included in the marketing plan, right? So if you have a marketing plan that has a sales plan, you're also, does anyone? I'm looking at the chat box. I can't see any answers. So if you don't have, you can say no. If you answer, just say yes. Okay, please. All right, guys, can we try, let's try and make it engaging. If you have a sales plan, you can type yes. If you don't have, you can also just type no. So let me be aware that we have people listening in the class, please. Okay, as he said yes. Odinika says no. John says no. Okay. Okay, Aziz, if you don't mind me asking, you said yes. What are some of the components of the sales plan that you have? Is it a document or is it something that you have in your head? Josephine said the marketing plan is what I'm used to, just about sales plan. Yeah, so as I said, Josephine, you can actually have a sales plan in a marketing plan, right? Marketing speaks to the brand, speaks to just not even to product development, but sales plan speaks to the product being sold, all right? Whether it's a service, whether it's a product being sold or a service being rendered, and that's specific to sales. While marketing speaks to the brand itself, which is more generic. Miracle says so in my head, I'm assuming that's what you mean. Okay. So most times we have this idea that, okay, this is what we should do, but we're not thinking about, we're not putting a structure to it. And what project management does for us is to actually put a structure. So there's a disciplined way to say, okay, you know what, I want to start 2026, right, with a goal. If I'm going to build or create, so if I'm into production or a manufacturer, if I'm going to produce 1,000 units, of my product for next year, which is what marketing will speak to as a plan, right? My sales plans will show how I'm going to sell the 1,000 units. So who are the stakeholders? Who should I be thinking about when trying to prospect? Do you get? Do I speak to everyone? And one of the things I've always highlighted during the classes I always have is that I always see that people just, okay, you know what? I come across somebody, let me try and sell my product. Now, when we look at some of the skills, you understand the importance of time management. At times, we are wasting time on people that we do not, that we would not buy our product or service. Okay, so they are not even looking at, they don't understand the product, and they're not even part of our sales process. So a sales cycle is a project. Define, right? So first of all, define what are your objectives, what are your goals, right? They have to be, what are you trying to achieve? So we're going into 2026 now. I'm sure we're going to do a lot of reflection this year. How has business been, right? Do a lot of review on the objectives or goals we set, right? Look at the ones that we're able to implement. What were the critical success factors? What went right? What didn't go right? What would 2026 be for us? Again, so how do we define a clearer objective this time, right? Is there a plan in place to achieve it? Because remember, this says he who fails to what plan, right? Plans to what fail. So we have to really be intentional about planning and defining the goal, right? So a major say would be is a temporary endeavor with a defined beginning and objective. The definition of what a project, and that's where we can align the project management to sales, because sales as a business, whether you're into production, manufacturing, or a service business, right? Selling is key for you every day. And selling should be what? Should be planned, should have a structure, which is what project management can provide for us. Do we have any questions? Any questions up until now? You can use the chat box. All right, so if you have any questions around sales before we go into the project management skills, you can put it in the chat box right now. All right. If you have any comments you want to make around it as well, or if you need any clarification as well, you can do that right now. So remember, the reason why we're looking at sales is because it's an important part of every business. We have three core functions in your business. You have marketing, you have operations, and you have finance, right? We usually say marketing starts the business. So even when marketing creates the design, remember the operation goes in and creates the product, right? Brings it to life. So whether it's a physical product, whether it's a service you're rendering, then of course you need finances, right, to be able to maybe to build the product, or maybe have like an office space, or maybe whatever you need for the activities to bring that product or service to life, right? Now, for that business to continue, for you to be able to sustain the business, you have to sell. If you're not able to make a sale, right, the business starts struggling. So every time, so that it becomes important for you to have a structure to how selling can be. And project management, right, allows us to be able to understand a disciplined way of doing that. So around we're going to look at five project management core skills that will help us for sales success. One is strategic planning. Two is time management. Three is risk management. Four is stakeholder management. And five, the last is scope management. All right. Now, these skills are meant to allow us understand how we can apply it to the sales cycle. Does anyone understand what the sales cycle is? If you've done a class or a session or a module around sales, do you understand what the sales cycle is? And what are some of the components in the sales cycle? What are some of the components in the sales cycle? Do you want to share in the chat box, or do you want to use the raise hand icon? Okay, so I think it's a chat, let me see. What are some of the components in the sales? So you have a sales process, right? You can call it the sales process or the sales cycle, right? So where does it start from and where does it end? Anyone? Or do you want me to believe that we're going about our normal business operation, just saying, okay, you know what, let's just go out there and hope that we just sell? Is there a structure? Is there a sales process to how you sell your product or your service? Okay, so I'm not getting any response. Let me see. Okay. Justin says product and price. Okay. Anybody else? Justin has said product and price. Does anyone have any other information around the sales cycle? Okay, so one thing, I don't know whether, see, you've not had a class around before. One of the things to think about is there's the prospecting aspect. Well, most times, before you decide to sell or approach a customer, right, you want to identify those potential customers that fit into your markets. And that's why we said the plan is important, because you can just go about approaching every other person. There's this joke I always crack around being approached on the streets of Lagos by someone real estate, so realtors trying to sell a property in Banana Island. For those of us that live in Lagos, Nigeria, I'm sure you're aware of Banana Island, which is one of the most priced premium locations when it comes to real estate in Nigeria, right? And I was wondering, what was this gentleman thinking? He walked up to me, I was driving, and he said, oh, I have this amazing property that I think you'll be interested in. And I said, okay. And he said, oh, it's in Banana Island, it goes for 500 million naira. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at him like, why do you think I have 500 million naira to buy a property? Yeah. And he was trying to convince me, and I kept on laughing, because in my head, I'm like, I'm not your target, I'm not your market. And if for some reason there was a plan in place that allowed you to be able to identify your prospects, right? You probably would, first of all, profile me before you even approach me, right? And that's why if you look at sales as a project, you get just the way in project management, there's a project charter, right? So more like a document that authorizes the project, that gives it a direction, gives it an objective and a goal, right? Your sales plan would also need to do that. What is the goal? Defining, so what is the goal for you for 2026? What are you trying to achieve around selling? Let's say, for example, okay, so we're going to get more funding from investors or from partners, right? So one of the things we want to do is that we want to build or create or manufacture more products. Now, for us to sustain the business, if we're doing, let's say this year, we're able to just sell 200 units of our product and we produce 300. So now we have more funds and we want to produce 1,000. Imagine if there's no sales plan in place. What magic are you thinking would allow that to happen? So first of all, there has to be, so this is what prayer management does for us. Sales, so around strategic planning, right? There has to be a clear goal setting, right? What is the goal? Define your clear revenue target, right? And what are your strategic objectives for the business? So for example, one of the things you could look at is so your objective will be more specific. So if you use the SMART principle, which speaks to specific, measurable, attainable, right, realistic, and time bound, right? So I could say that for the first quarter of next year, right, I want to be able to sell 200 units in the first quarter, right, to small businesses in Lagos, Nigeria, right? So now I've captured a goal for the first quarter. Now I could also do, so when you look at long term, you should be short term to it. So it becomes easily when I have a clear goal and I also have objectives to it. Now the objectives make it more specific and measurable as well. So you would know from the first month to say, okay, am I even on my way to achieving this? Now, and that's where milestones speak to. So if, for example, I'm saying, okay, I want to sell 200 units of my product by the end of first quarter, right? One milestone for me, let me use annually, sorry, if I want to sell 200 annually, right? One milestone would be that, okay, by the first quarter of 2026, we should have sold at least 50 units of our product. That becomes a milestone. So that tells you also, by the time you get to that milestone, it tells you whether there's a possibility of achieving the 200 for the end of the year. But imagine if you are just done 5 units. And remember, you're trying to sell 200 at the end of the year, right? So you go back and look at the sales plan as what is the approach we're using? Now, another thing would be for us to achieve this, what are the resources that will be required? Now, resources could be human resources, which will speak to the kind of team. So I want to onboard, let me get like 3 or 4 sales executives. I'm going to get a van, right? So that I can carry the sales executives and the products to different locations where I want to sell. It could also be that, okay, I'm also looking at, the resources in terms of financial resources, how much we would need, right, to be able to execute this. Because, for example, we have to pay commission or salaries to these sales executives, right? We need to buy machinery, so there's a funding requirement there. Then also you're looking at also what maybe you can look at, so it could be labor as well. It could also be infrastructure. Whatever it is, you have to identify the internal assets you require, right, for you to be able to achieve this. And that's why it becomes important to have a plan that allows you to execute this. Most businesses struggle because there is no plan to execute sales. It's like, okay, I've created the product should sell itself. Most times that never happens, right? You must be intentional about selling, right? And when you have a sales plan, which is what project management skills can allow you to achieve, it becomes easier to know, okay, is this plan, is it working? Should we maintain the same strategies we're using, right? So I said, okay, I want to get 3 sales executives, maybe every twice a week, move them to an open market, right? Get them to approach individuals. Now, remember, the open market, because I've also profiled the market to say that the people here are people that are the kind of people that will be interested in the products or services that I want to sell, right? So that is possible. I'm going to do that as a strategy. Now, once I start executing, I also need to reevaluate or evaluate the strategy to say, okay, is it working? In the last 1 or 2 weeks that we did this, right? What has been the outcome? Have we been able to make a sale? What are the challenges? What are the feedbacks? And go back and say, okay, this is not working for us, right? We need to change this. And that still speaks to what? The sales plan itself, right? So we need to do all this around sales, okay? Now, so strategy plan is important. Then another core skill that you cannot take away is time management. Now, it's important that, because when you go look at time and look at effective time management in sales, it's just not about punctuality. So we're not saying, oh, that maybe it's being there on time to be able to engage the prospect or the customer. No, it goes beyond that. In project management, right, there's what we call the critical path method. And that means that you need to be able to identify, sorry, looking at the chat box, okay? We need to identify the sequence of events that must happen to close a deal on time. So let's look at a business here, right? So who wants to volunteer? Let's use your business as an example. If you want to volunteer, please just raise your hand up. Let's use your business as an example to look at, okay, what are some of the sequence of events that need to happen for a sale to happen? Anyone who wants to volunteer the business? We have about 21 participants. Hello, guys. Who would like to volunteer their business for us to use as a case study to explain the critical parts? Why are we engaging, guys? We're not engaging. So we are listening, which is good. At the same time, we also need to be able to respond so we're sure that everyone understands and it's clear. Okay. So let me look at the chat box. Someone sent a message. Okay, I don't have anyone's comment there. Okay, I can see now. Okay, so I presently have a service I am resending, ushering. So ushering service, you mean events ushering, right? I want to, okay. Okay, so let's look at that as an example. So towards the end of the year, you have a lot of events that will happen in Lagos. There's even they call it 30 December. So different parties, events will be happening, a lot of weddings, a lot of birthday celebration, a lot of Christmas parties, right? And one of the things that would be required is when these event planners will be looking for ushers, the people that would help for them to be able to have successful events. Now, imagine having as an event planner, having one of these organizations, right? What's the critical parameter? What are the events for? So now, if you want, let's say you are an ushering company, right, that you provide ushers for events, so maybe to event planners, what would be the secret of it that must happen for a deal to close? Now, a deal to close would be that people would need your service. So now looking at it, can anyone give me an example? What are some of those critical activities that must happen in that sales pipeline? Now, remember, we've not closed the sale. We're trying to make sure that we get as many event planners, right? Or people that or the host of the parties to be able to use our service, to use our service. So how do we get them to know about our products or our service? How do we get them to engage with us? What are some of those critical activities that must happen in the first place? What do we think? Except you're not running a business here, you should be able to answer this. What are some of those events, some of those activities that must happen for this to succeed? My class is not as engaging as I expected. I can't see the chat. So Timmy, can you share? I think there's a message in the chat box. Can you let me know what it says, please? Okay, budget first. John says budget first, so I can see that. Budget first. So John, you say budget. Budget for what? What are you budgeting for? We want to be specific around it. Budget for. Timmy says advertise, create. So create, advertise, very important. So you see now, if like one of my colleagues would always say that people do business with people that they know. So if people don't know you, if you don't advertise, you don't create visibility, you don't build relationship, right? How will people use your service? So of course, so advertise becomes a critical activity, right? Good. Awareness becomes a critical activity. Profiling, Josephine, very good, becomes a critical advertising. Promotion, yes, very good. Do you understand? So really now, there are activities that must happen in the business, right? For you to be able to even think about closing a sale. And that's what the critical part says, which is how do you define? And that's what the sales cycle also do. How do you define that? Okay, you know what? The first thing we need to do is, first of all, do we even have a brand? Do we have the right product? Do we have the right service? Right. So maybe an activity would be build the right service, because you first create, right, before you deliver. The answer, so build the right product around. So that's what marketing would always align to sales, because marketing allows you to what? To build the right product, right, before you can even what? Create awareness. There are times you can be creating awareness for the product that people are not interested in. So if you build the right product, which is one of the pathway, right, then the awareness, the promotion, the conversations, right? Are you in the right places? Is there networking? So every business must understand what are the sequence of events that must happen for you to close a deal on time. And time is so important, because most times we lose deals because of time management. You get, so now if you look at the Eisenhower matrix, it speaks to how you focus on high impact versus urgent tasks. So you can see my slide, right? There are certain things that you must put as urgent that needs to be carried out now. If you don't carry out those actions or those activities that particular time, right, they will affect your sales. And there are others that you must delegate. As business owners, we are always trying to do everything, and that's not a good thing. The reason why we build teams is to understand why we build the right team, right? Mostly around effective team, is to get the right people to be able to do the things that we shouldn't be doing, because we are focusing on the things that we should do. So prioritizing activities is very important in time management. It's just not speaking about, oh, you being punctual. No, it speaks to what? Understanding the pipeline of how activities should happen in your business. Okay? So when it's urgent, it needs to be done, right? When it's not urgent, you can schedule a time for when it needs to be done, right? When it's not so important, you can delegate it, but who can do it right? So when we also look at delegation, we're not speaking to giving, you have to also profile, know the right people that you can delegate the right activities to, right? And there's some activities that you just need to eliminate, because the outcome, they have no impact in the business, right? And most times we find ourselves in business trying to, thinking that the more we do, the more we get. Not really, because when people say, oh, you have to work smart and not work hard, it could also be because working hard for you might be going to the office every day and making sure that they see you in the office, but you're not getting any work done. But working smart would be understanding the activities that would deliver the impact in the business and making sure that you do it. So we need to prioritize, right? Understand where the high impact, right, in our business is, and what also the urgent task. We need to understand that so that we do not lose out. Because I would say that most of the time in business, one thing that we fail to do is understand importance and urgent task. And if we can do that, then we are doing time management very well. All right. Any questions around this, or comments, or any clarification? So Miracle said, "Who are you serving?" Okay, I want to believe you're responding to the earlier question I did ask. So should I move forward? Any question around this? Let's use our chat box, please. Should I move forward? Is it clear? Do you have questions or comments? Okay, so another thing we need to look at is risk management. Every project has a risk. Sales is also a risk as well, right? So most times in selling, we kind of ignore this risk. We ignore the risk, but every project has a risk. So what is the risk of you using the sales approach, right? What does it mean? Also remember that time is the value and is a factor, right? And time, if you don't use time properly, right? Of course, it also allows you to not achieve things in time. So in project, risk are logged and mitigated. In sales, they are often ignored until it's too late, right? In project management, one of the things you should understand is you have to be proactive, right? We speak to the salesperson as objection handling, but what can you even do, right, to avoid objections in the first place? If you understand the risk in the business, if you understand those that have the power to block your deals, right? For example, if you're working with a new partner, okay, and the partner, maybe you have a contract that has a contract for 3 years. At some point, that contract would elapse, and they might appoint somebody new. That new person, right, might not align with your business, right? That becomes a risk that you need to register. Do you understand? And what have you put in place that when at that particular time, when this happens, right, how do we make sure that we're still in business? So it could be a new stakeholder. It could even be that maybe even as a business, what we intended to spend money on, right, initially, right, there was a change in it. So budget freeze, and now you don't have access to it. So every business must, right, understand risk, and not just understand risk, but mitigate risk. So how do you mitigate your risk in sales? It's important. So it becomes a strategy so we call it risk register for every major opportunity to track what probability and impact. I could say maybe for your own business, right? For those of us that maybe we're doing production or doing service, the risk of wasting, you could call it wasting resources, or maybe spending resources and not getting the outcome. Because it's also a risk. You could decide to do an event, right? An event where you expect to be 100 participants, right? Now, what is the risk there? The risk is that 100 participants registered for the event, but there's also a risk of not 100 participants turning up. So how do we manage that risk as well? So a risk could also be that because you do not want to, you want to mitigate that risk, you put things in place, right, to make sure that that doesn't, so what is the probability of having 50% or having 70%? Okay, so these are some of the things. And one good thing about the business is that you're meant to learn every time you get. So when we do certain things, we might not understand some risk at the beginning, but later on doing operations while we're in the business, we get to figure out all that other risks that we did not see earlier. All right. So risk management is very important as a business. Good. Okay, I can see your messages. All right. And the fourth one, sorry, before the last one, is stakeholders management. We call this orchestrating the buy. Now, in today's world, B2B, which is business to business, right? When you're trying to make a deal, you're dealing with you're not dealing with one person, you're not dealing with two persons. Most times you're doing an average of 6 to 10 decision makers. And I find managing these decision makers is actually a project on its own. Because, for example, we send proposals, we meet potential partners, and maybe the first time you've drafted a proposal, or maybe you had a verbal communication with one of the clients that works in an organization, and you assume, yes, he or she might be a decision maker, right? but there might be other decision makers that you should be aware of. Yes, and you not even understanding the process of how the organization is structured to understand, okay, who are the people that make that decision, right? So managing this committee is pure project management. For us, even in the business, we have internal alignment where you understand that, okay, your own products, right? Because if you look at a physical product, let's say you want to sell a physical product now, the information on the physical product, does it align with the product itself? You get, and it affects you when you're also selling to businesses or to potential clients, because if there's no alignment with what the product can do, and that's why you at times you get brands being sued. It's illegal because of the fact that what the sales team sold, they missed out on maybe the side effects, right? Or they didn't give the right information when communicating to potential sales. So you need to be very careful around decision makers, right? Identify champion blockers and economic buyers. So in marketing, we look at those maybe opinion leaders in this part of the country. We like to get them as influencers, people that can motivate others to buy, right? For selling as well, it's an important strategy for you, because if you look at most brands in Nigeria, right, influencer or affiliate marketing is one important approach for selling. So for us, when we say orchestrate the buy, stakeholders could be your partners, could be government as well. Remember, when government comes with certain policies, these are environmental factors that can affect your business. So 1 minute you have a successful business, the next minute government comes up with a policy that affects your business. That's the stakeholder. So are you also aware of the policies that come out? Are you following the government to understand, okay, next year they might be changing, the government is going to change in the next 2 years, right? They might change the policy as well. How does that affect my business? So you need to identify all the stakeholders, right? Those ones that can influence your business positively, can influence and also influence the business negatively as well. Are we good? And the last one speaks to scope management, right? Now, so in sales, we usually say that, so there's this phrase we call scope creep. It kills deals and destroys margins. Now, what that means is that at times there is already a requirement, based on how these projects will be achieved, right? Then you, without realizing, it now leads to project features, requests, and requirements increase from initial scope over the course of the project life scope. The reason why we focus on scope management is that you already have a clear purpose for what you want to achieve. But at times we do not anticipate that it can go beyond that. So there's no clarity in what we want to achieve instead of the work. So your sales team, I remember taking a class for marketing and sales, and one of the case study we did was a Mr. Emeka that was trying to generate a revenue of about maybe 1.9 or 9.1 million. The reason why it was trying to do that was because there was a goal. The goal was to make 5.5% on that 9.9, which was what his partners were offering. So there was a scope of work there, and that was a project for him. It was to happen for about 1 month. So he built a team around that scope, and he made sure that there was clarity around, okay, what we want to achieve, right, with this product for a period of time. Yeah, so clearly communicating what the product does and do not avoid churn later. So at times we also find out that the sales team, right, and the sales executives or the sales rep do not communicate really what the products can do. So product knowledge becomes very important as a skill or as characteristics of sales rep. Product knowledge. If you don't understand what product or the service, when we use what product, you're referring to both product and service can do, right? You struggle to communicate to the audience. You also struggle around objection handling. So beyond define the deliverables, let the team understand clearly, right, that these are the deliverables. We're expected to deliver this within this period of time. This is what it entails. Make sure your team is being trained around the product knowledge. So because when you go outside, one of the things that can happen to you is when your team is trying to sell a product or service, right, and you have the prospect asking questions and they cannot respond to them. You get, I'm not sure, I don't know, right? Already, that's already for the prospect already, they lose confidence in what you're trying to sell to them. I'm like, oh, really? You do not know this? So you cannot answer their questions. So deliverables should also be around product knowledge, right? Communication is so important, right? And you must clearly define deliverables for the team within a certain period of time. Are we clear on that? So ensuring the statement of work matches the sales pitch at the end. So we looked at the five skills that can help us for sales. Now the outcome, the reason why we're doing this. So what happens when the sales teams master these project management skills? Look at the five of them. What you can do is that you can shorten the sales cycle. Now remember, I said the sales cycle speaks to your prospecting, which is around your profiling, speaks to your approach, speaks to your presentation, speaks to your objection handling, speaks to your follow-up as well. You're closing the sale and speaks to your follow-up. So that's the sales cycle. Now, the time you spend in trying to close a sale or convert a prospect to a customer can be reduced if you have a structure to it using project management skill, right? Now, also, it can also improve your forecast accuracy. And for us, I said, giving an example of saying, what do you want to achieve for 2026? What is important? Be able to understand the goal, to have a sales plan that speaks to a goal, speaks to objectives, speaks to the resources required to be able to achieve it, put a timeline to it, right? Understand the risk, right? And put mitigation plans as well. Then it becomes easier. Then also the last one is what? Enhance customer experience. Sales, so companies that follow a structured sales process, right? Usually are able to understand the customer better and give them a better experience around it. All right, guys, are we clear? So these are the outcomes expected from the skills you can use, the project management skills you can use for sales process. Do we have questions or comments, or do you need clarity on any of them? All right, let's use the chat box, please. We can also use the mic as well. If you want to speak, use the raise an icon, please. All right, participants, are you there? Please comment, use the chat box, ask your questions. Do you have comments? Is it clear? Do you understand the importance of project management skills for sales success now? Is there is there a new knowledge for you? Is there something that you think you've unlearned and now you've relearned? Should I assume that everyone understands without? So if you use a yes or a no in the chat box, please. Okay, for me. This is something new knowledge for me, but got this right towards the end. Okay. Getting clearer, I guess I understand better. Risk management is very important, Miracle. Good. Okay, well, then I've learned. My take home for now is the sales plan. Very good, Josephine. Okay. All right, very good, guys. So the goal for us, as always, is to try as much as possible to provide information that could help you improve your businesses. Whether you're a startup, a small business, you've been running the business for many years, or you're just about to start, right? But the goal is sales is an important part of your business. Without sales, you can't sustain the business. And sales doesn't have to be money. Could also be building relationship. So it's really about exchange of value, right? So we as much as possible as skills, we also like to thank everyone. The goal for us is to support small businesses around webinars, programs, and events to help you improve your business. So thank you so much for joining. I know it was rather short and it might seem like maybe information overload, but take your time. We have our information, our contacts. So in case you want to follow us on, not in case, we would appreciate you follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram as well, and go to our website. What we do is, this is a project, a DigiSkill project by Youth Power with other partners across the world. And this is part of the deliverables where we organize webinars to help small businesses and startups like yourself. We've had, I think we've had 3 webinars this year, and this is the 4th one. Will be by next year, we'll start the webinars again. And we also have the online dialogues, which we do with the partners do as well, which we also share the information so that you can also join. And you're constantly engaging with participants from within Nigeria, outside Nigeria as well, which allows you to learn more and understand cultural differences as well. So it's important that you follow us and listen and also pay attention to the events we do. We always share that on our platform. So thank you very much for listening. I'll just read some of the chats in the chat box. Sorry. Miracle said, I registered businesses for brand. My question is, how do I manage risk? Hold on. Sorry, Miracle. Oh, so Chinasa, do you want to take the questions? I can see there are a few of them. Then I'll just answer them. Okay, so if you can respond, let me just read it. So Miracle says, okay, thank you for the session. I register businesses for brand. My question is, how do I manage risk when a client business name has issues and client is ready to arrest you? So very good. So that's a very good question. So first of all, you need to identify the risk. What are the risks? You do not have control. You help businesses, you help register businesses, right? With CAC. You're not CAC, right? So my question would be that at the point of where you're getting businesses to want to help them to render the service, do you inform them of what can happen? Are they aware of the risk that, okay, so we help businesses, we help you register, but CAC is the body in charge of registration, right? And this is the process. So at times this might happen and we cannot do anything about it. We just wait for it a while. Like, are they aware of the risk? Because really, it's about information. If you do not communicate the right information, if you don't tell me what can happen or what can go wrong, and something now goes wrong, which is out of your control, of course, I'm going to come for you. So I think it's important that we communicate as for what you do, you communicate what the power you have in terms of what we can only apply for you, but CAC has the final decision. Do you understand? Because the reason why you're arresting is because it seems like what you've said is not what you're doing. It says, so clients don't want to understand, but also very important, do you have a contract? Do you have a contract with them? Do you have a kind of engagement with them? At the point of where, are there terms and conditions? Do they read all that? Do you have a contract of engagement before you proceed with them? Because of course, if there's a contract of engagement and your terms and conditions are very clear, how can they hold you responsible when they are really clear? So you don't have a contract of engagement. So maybe you should put that into practice to avoid issues like this. Is that okay? Josephine said, for my health practice, I formed a WhatsApp group to engage prospects and share health solution information. Can I call this a sales plan? No, Josephine, unfortunately, a sales plan has to be a document, right? So one use the plan. So just the way it's, so as I said, it must be a document, like a marketing plan. It has to be a document, so right? So what you're doing, a WhatsApp group is just one of the strategies you're doing. So maybe one of your channels to be able to build your sales, right? But a sales plan speaks to a document, right? So it has to have clearly your goal, your objectives, right? Whether it is a software acronym, but you must have a document that you are following, more like a template. Is that clear? All right, thank you, everyone. Not sure whether we have any more questions. So I would like to stop here and I will hand over back to Chinasa.
Wow. Thank you very much, Mr. Uche. So thank you very much to our great expert and facilitator. We want to say a very thank you to you for giving us an holistic guide to project management and skills. for sales success. So you took us through strategic planning, time management, risk management, stakeholders management, and also scope management for businesses. So I want to say a very big thank you to you for walking us through this part. And want to also say thank you to Youth Power for giving us this platform for us to be able to empower youth through DigiSkill. We say thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for joining. We see you next time on our DigiSkill Dialogue section on the 9th of December. Thank you very much.